Hello you lovely lot, and welcome back to a brand new stagey review here on my channel. Today we are going to be talking about the one and only Peter Pan Goes Wrong. It is currently on its UK tour and I had the chance to go and check it out at the Edinburgh Playhouse. So what do you say I tell you a little bit about what I think? So, firstly, you're probably sat there thinking, Flora, what on earth is Peter Pan Goes Wrong about? Well, it is kind of what it says on the tin. It is a production of Peter Pan that goes wrong. But hold up, there is more to it than that. Because Peter Pan Goes Wrong is set in what I like to consider the Corley Polytechnic University Drama Society Extended Universe. That was a mouthful, I know, but let me explain. If you are familiar with Mischief Comedy's work, then you will know that they also have shows such as The Play That Goes Wrong, The Goes Wrong Show, The Nativity Goes Wrong, and Christmas Carol Goes Wrong. And these, believe it or not, all exist within the same universe, and that is because they contain the same characters. You're probably wondering, Flora, Peter Pan and The Nativity do not include the same characters. What version of Peter Pan were you reading? I don't remember, like, the Angel Gabriel being in that. No, you would be quite correct. The Angel Gabriel is not in Peter Pan, at least not as far as I'm aware. But the actor who plays Angel Gabriel, Robert, is also in Peter Pan, in which he plays a collection of characters, including Nana the dog and a pirate who I think is called Curly. Now, no, this is not the actor transferring from one show to another. It is actually the character Robert who is played by an actor, if that makes sense. Geez, how do I explain this in a way that's not super complicated? Okay, so you've got, on this plane, right, you've got the story of Peter Pan, okay? And then here you have the characters of the Corley Polytechnic University Drama Society. And these characters, okay, are played by actors. And these actors exist in our world, okay, playing characters that exist in the world of the Cornell Polytechnic University Drama Society, and these characters themselves are actors who go on to play characters in Peter Pan Goes Wrong. If that makes sense. So we're thinking our world, okay, actors playing characters who are actors who play characters, okay? It's like a really complicated sandwich. So before I dive into my actual review, I'm going to explain slightly to you who these characters are. We start off with Chris Bean, the director, and he is very proud of the fact he is the director. He directs each and every one of Cornell Polytechnic Drama Society's plays. He was the one who directed A Murder at Havisham Manor, which if you have seen The Play That Goes Wrong, you will know that is The Play That Goes Wrong. He also directed The Nativity. He directs all of the mini plays that happen in the Goes Wrong show, and he is also technically the director for Christmas Carol Goes Wrong, I believe, although he never officially steps on and goes, "I'm Chris Bean, I'm the director," which is like his little catchphrase. Chris Bean is very highly strung and he is a perfectionist. He definitely believes he is the best actor, and he is very disgruntled at the fact that the calibre of actor in the Cornell Polytechnic University Drama Society's drama club aren't the best actors he can get. From Chris, we move on to the character of Robert. Now, Robert considers himself to be the co-director and equal, if not better, than Chris at all things theatre. He is very self-assured and he is very confident, proud author of Anything You Can Act, I Can Act Louder, and him and Chris are frequently butting heads unless you get them onto the topic of how bad everyone else in the drama society is. These two love a little bitch with one another, but if they're not bitching, they're butting heads. Next up in our group, we have Jonathan. Now, Jonathan in Peter Pan Goes Wrong is playing Peter. It is his first lead role. He comes across as a lot more level-headed than all of the other Cornell Polytechnic Drama Society characters. He is very well known for missing his cues or being unable to get on stage to say his lines. That's kind of a running trope, which is why casting him as Peter in Peter Pan is like a big moment for him. Despite him being level-headed, he also does let the fact that he is the lead in this show kind of go to his head, and he kind of becomes quite mean as a result of it. And unfortunately, his meanness is directed to the next character we're going to be talking about, and that is Max. Max is definitely a very ambitious actor with regards to the Cornell Drama Society. He definitely likes playing to the audience a lot. Anything that will get a reaction from them, particularly big cheers for him or like a big "aww," like anything dramatic from the audience, he kind of plays into that, much to kind of Chris's dismay, which I really appreciate. I think that's a really fun element of his character. And then part of the reason Jonathan is so mean to Max is because the two of them are fighting over Sandra. Now, Sandra is Cornell's leading lady, mostly because they don't really have another one. And she's very enthusiastic, although she has a tendency to overact and make all of her characters kind of come off quite promiscuous, regardless of how appropriate it is for that character to be acting that way. We also have Dennis. Dennis literally cannot remember any of his lines to save his life. Why he's in the Drama Society, I'm not entirely sure. But bear in mind, it is only his lines he can't remember. Dennis has no problem remembering other people's lines, which can lead to, again, more frustration from Chris. Dennis is definitely a thorn in his side, often leading to poor Dennis getting screamed at when he's not doing what Chris wants. We also have Annie, who used to be the stage manager for Corley, but she decided to become an actor after she had to step in at the murder of Havisham Manor, and becoming an actor definitely helped her come out of her shell. But her leaving the role of stage manager means that the lighting and sound guy, Trevor, has to step up and do stage management on top of lighting and sound. Now, I think Trevor is the best character, okay? He seems so uninterested in, like, all of the other Corley Polytechnic Drama Society members. Like, he's got this kind of tough, like, uninterested exterior, but, like, I know deep down, okay? I know deep down that Trevor loves it. He loves every minute of it. He'll pretend he's only there because he needed the credits for his music course, but no. Trevor secretly loves stage managing, and he secretly loves all of the nut jobs that are part of the Drama Society. And then in Peter Pan Goes Wrong, we also have the inclusion of Lucy, who is Robert, who you'll remember from earlier's niece. She has terrible stage fright, and I definitely get the impression that Robert's making her be there for some reason, although I'm not entirely sure why. But that should hopefully be you guys caught up on the characters that are playing the roles in Peter Pan. Going back to my little diagram from earlier, I don't know if that helped explain anything else, but that means if I'm mentioning things like Robert and stuff, that's not the names of the actors, but more the names of the characters within the show. I thought I would just clear that up for you. I also just love the lore of the Corley Polytechnic Drama Society Extended Universe. I really want to make a video on it to explain it to you guys, but I have no idea if there is any interest for that. So if there is interest for that, let me know down in the comments, because I will happily make it to you and explain it a bit better than my slightly strange visual diagram. But the Corley Polytechnic Drama Society Extended Universe briefly explained to you, let's dive into the good, the bad, and the ugly. We are going to start off the good with the Corley Polytechnic Drama Society Extended Universe. You're probably sick of hearing about it, and it is very much a mouthful to talk about, but part of the reason that a mischief comedy show and a goes wrong show is so great is because of this kind of story within a story. I promise that's not me farting, that is my belt rubbing against my chair. Just to clarify, I think the creation of this extended universe really allows us to connect with the characters who are playing the roles within the show in a way that you maybe don't connect with actors just generally. And it really helps draw you into the universe in which this show is being staged. It also kind of helps sell some of the laughs, as well as give motive behind why certain characters are acting a certain way in reaction to certain things happening, which I think is really great. And that connection with the characters starts way before the show has even officially started, because the minute you sit down in your seat, you start to notice that things are already going slightly wrong before the show's even started. Begin small with people like Trevor and some of the other backstage crew members coming onto stage to set props, make sure things are in the right place, tidy up the set. And then you realise that Trevor has lost his hammer. And this is the moment that stuff starts to happen with regards to the audience being included, as Trevor and the backstage team head out in search of this hammer, entering the audience to see if we have seen it. With Trevor's absence from the stage, Robert comes on and decides to try and fix some lighting, and as he's doing so, he ends up making the whole lighting within the theatre flicker, not just the lights on stage, which I think is a brilliant element. We also see things like Dennis arriving late and Chris having a go at him for it, Lucy in her stage fright trying to escape, and Chris and Robert chasing her around the theatre trying to catch her, calling in audience members to block her path and things like that, which I think is really funny. And then going back to Robert's lights, right before the show officially starts, Robert's like, I've got this wire, but I need to plug it in at the back of the theatre. So the Corley lot get the audience to help run this wire from the stage to the back of the theatre by standing up and holding the cable. I took part in this, and my God, was my arm hurting. I was holding it up for like a good 10 minutes. I even had my own goes wrong moment when it came to taking the cable back to the stage, because we had to pass all of it back. The woman in front of me was having nothing to do with this, right? Sat in her seat, hands in her pockets, like proper grumpy look on her face. And the power coupler, quite heavy bearing in mind. I was like, hey, can you grab this? Can you grab, like trying to get her like, hey, you don't have to interact, but like, can you help me? Because it was like me, where she was sitting, empty seat, the next guy that needed to grab the wire to get it back to the I hit her in the back of the head with it. I was like, God, the show's going wrong for me and I'm not even part of it. So that was quite funny. She wasn't hurt. She just looked more pissed off than she already did. But I found it funny, and I think that's what's important, because that's the spirit of the show, no? Tangent aside, that was great, and it was brilliant fun to be able to get involved. And another thing I forgot to mention is that Jonathan was going around signing people's programs as Peter Pan. Chris came over as he was signing it for me. I was like, Jonathan, get back, step, what are you doing? Getting like really pissy at him, and Jonathan's like, I'm just coming to see my adoring fans, which I really appreciated. It made for some really fun interactions with the characters, which was great. Because of the Corley Polytechnic Drama Society extended universe, we are able to have these moments of interaction with the characters. I'm going to keep referring to this, the characters who will be playing the roles in Peter Pan, right? It really helps us get to know them and establish them as characters before we get to meet them as actors on the stage. Of course, I can't exclude comedy from this good category. Like, if I put it anywhere else, it'd be a bit of a rubbish show. But part of what is so great about a Goes Wrong show, and Peter Pan Goes Wrong specifically, is how funny it is. My cheeks were hurting the whole time because of how much I was smiling. It was just so joyous and such fun to giggle for like an hour and a half. I really loved that. There's also a lot of different types of comedy. There's physical comedy, slapstick, mishaps going wrong on the stage, but ultimately it is all very human comedy, and it's so funny because it's relatable, especially if you've ever done amateur theatre, because you know how badly things can go wrong because of the smallest little detail being wrong, and I think that's brilliant. I definitely connect with it in that element, particularly the Trevor character, because I used to stage manage. I wonder why he's my favourite. But through the comedy and through the Corley Polytechnic Drama Society extended universe, you end up with this gorgeous storytelling. It's a very layered story because you not only have them telling the story of Peter Pan, but you also have their story as a group of friends. I don't know, could you call them friends? They beef too much to be friends, but I'm going to say friends because it's easier. You also have the story of a group of friends happening, but they're not happening in parallel. They're kind of like weaving in and out of one another. As stuff is going wrong with the show Peter Pan, you are learning new things about the characters. And because stuff's going on between the characters, stuff starts going wrong on stage. So they kind of end up storyline-wise going like this. And this unhinged and chaotic energy is great, but at the end of the day, the story ultimately has a really uplifting and happy ending, with little nervous Lucy stepping forward to take charge and finish the story off strongly, which I really appreciated. Oh, and another thing I loved, Act 2 became a musical. They have this whole like faith and trust and fairy dust thing. The song is so catchy. I'm going to be singing that for hours now, but the song is so catchy and so fun, and I love that they included it for literally no reason other than that they could. The set is also beautiful for this show. I think they've managed to nail the look of what's achievable for like a university level acting group. Not to say it looks tacky, but it very much looks very DIY and a bit kind of, I think naff's the right word for it. Like, there's something kind of hokey and cute about it. And I think they nail that aesthetic fantastically. But the way this set is able to evolve and change as well is brilliant. A lot of the kind of jokes and humour come from things going wrong with the set. But what's great is that you can't, just by looking at it, tell where those mishaps are going to happen. And I think that is a brilliant thing that they've been able to achieve. And then another thing, the fact that it goes from being pristine and ready to go for the show to literally like a smouldering heap of ruins at the very end, I think is fantastic. The way that set transforms along with the story visually is really great with regards to the storytelling. And then the final thing in the good category before we move on is definitely going to be the audience interactions, because the audience interactions are what make this show so repeatable. If there was no audience interaction opportunities, I think it would be a show that was kind of like a one and done because you knew where all the jokes were happening. But because of the audience interaction, it stays fresh and it definitely keeps the actors on their toes. If you've watched Peter Pan Goes Wrong, the BBC special, then you'll know there's a moment where Captain Hook, played by Chris Bean, is trying to open a bottle of poison to poison Jonathan's Peter Pan, but he can't open it because he's got a hook. And usually someone in the audience eventually shouts, "Do you need a hand?" To which Chris usually has a bit of a hissy fit. But our audience, someone decided, "Just use your mouth," was the thing they wanted to shout out. So it led to Chris going on this like 5-minute rant about the fact that it was a bottle of poison. And so if he opened it with his mouth, he would die too. Our audience was also really good at picking up on cues, like when to boo or hiss at Chris, which really wound him up. When to cheer, when to shout encouraging things at the cast. when to kind of make it a bit of a pantomime. All of that was really fantastic. I also loved the fact that they were able to tailor some of this audience interaction to the fact that we were in Edinburgh. And Chris has this whole thing where he was like, oh, knew we should have stayed in England in response to our interactions with him, and goes on this massive rant about Scotland, you know, and someone shouts, "At least we can play rugby!" Which that had me in stitches. Like, the whole audience was cackling in response to this. And that's what made this show, like, this specific showing of it so fantastic. Another great moment was when Chris was like, "You're the worst audience I've ever had." So naturally, we all let out a massive cheer as if this was something to celebrate. So many moments that I could share with you guys. But ultimately, I do think the audience themselves were part of what made this show great, because without the audience, you couldn't have the audience interactions that we did. And then, of course, just to say that the costumes and the cast were also absolutely fantastic. But I do think it's worth moving on to the bad before I spend 40 minutes explaining to you guys why I think the law of the Corley Polytechnic University Drama Society is like chef's kiss. So the bad. All right, I mentioned audience participation / interactions in the good category, but I'm also going to bring it into the bad. As I said earlier, the audience can definitely make or break some of the audience interaction moments, with some audiences being a lot more receptive and creative with regards to what they are calling out and interacting with the characters with. You could see this show 4 times and have a dud audience one night and have an amazing audience like I did another night. So it can be a little bit hit or miss. And especially if you're a person who the thought of being called on to do anything is like your worst nightmare, then I can definitely see how audience participation would make this show unenjoyable for you. There are places you can sit that are safer. Further back in the auditorium and up in the stalls is definitely a great place for you to sit. But given that at the start of the show, the cast and crew are running around all over the place, it's not guaranteed that you won't be spoken to, but they are usually pretty good at being able to read whether people want to be spoken to or not. So that is worth bearing in mind. Another thing in the bad category for me is going to be the fact that it does create a panto-like atmosphere, but confusingly so. This show isn't a pantomime, but it does play into the fact that Peter Pan is commonly used as a pantomime, with Robert and Chris very much butting heads on whether it is a pantomime, with Robert saying, "Oh yes it is," and Chris saying, "Oh no it isn't," which leads to lots of great moments for the audience to be able to call out and shout out, "Oh no it isn't," "Oh yes it is," or "He's behind you," to wind Chris up. But if you are someone who struggles with sudden loud outbursts from the audience around you, I can definitely see why this would maybe create a less desirable atmosphere within which to watch a theatre show. This encouragement of shouting out also led to an experience when I went to see it in London over Christmas, where there were kids actually asked by a front of house staff member to be quiet because they were shouting out random things at random points that weren't necessarily in line with the show, spoiling it for those of us around them. It definitely creates a confusing atmosphere, and I can totally see why those kids thought it was okay to shout out, because other people were. They just weren't aware that what other people were shouting out was kind of like relevant to the show, if that makes sense. But those are some very minor things in the bad detail, and it is now time to consult the book and move on to the ugly category. There's nothing here. Maybe I'm biased because I love anything that Mischief produces, but I genuinely think Peter Pan Goes Wrong is such a fun and entertaining show that I genuinely couldn't find anything to fault with it enough to put it in the ugly category. Whilst I appreciate something like this definitely isn't everybody's cup of tea, I think there is such a need in the world for humour and joy and to just sit there and giggle, and Peter Pan Goes Wrong delivers on that tenfold. I'm sure other people have things to say about it that I would maybe disagree with, and that's fine. So if you do, let me know down in the comments. But I think it's such a fun show and such a fun night out, and it's hard to leave that theatre feeling sad or grumpy. It's uplifting, and like I said, it just makes your cheeks hurt. It's just good fun, and I think Mischief have done a fantastic job with it. So, well done. But there you have it. There is my review of Peter Pan Goes Wrong at the Edinburgh Playhouse. Speaking of, a massive thank you to the Edinburgh Playhouse for inviting me along to this, because I didn't know if I would be able to go. And so to have the opportunity to be invited to review it is fantastic. But if it is more reviews you guys fancy, why don't you check out some of the other reviews already up on my channel, and make sure you are subscribed so you don't miss the next review, which is going to be Hamilton. I was at its Scottish premiere, so I have a lot of thoughts and feelings to share with you. But that is all for you guys today, so Make sure you like this video, subscribe, and as always, my lovelies, remember to stay stagey. I'll see you on the next one. Bye!